This is Modern Persian Food,
a culinary podcast for today's food enthusiast.
We talk about classic Persian flavors,
modern recipes,
and embracing culture and identity through food.
I'm Bita.
And I'm also Bita.
Welcome to our show. Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 133. Today, we're going to be demystifying Kashk. We're going to hear about what it is, what it tastes like, ways to use it, and maybe, time permitting, how to actually make it from scratch. We are honored to be joined by Omid Roustaei, the Caspian Chef, as our special guest. Omid is a well-known writer, teacher, contributor, and influencer in the Persian space. Thank you so much for being here, Omid. June.
My pleasure. I am so grateful to be back with two lovely friends once again to talk about this amazing ingredient we call Kashk.
Yes, thank you so much. For those of you who remember, Omid was one of our first guests back in episode number 31, where we talk about Caspian Sea regional foods. So if you have not listened to that episode, please scroll back and listen to that when you get a chance. We'll also link it in the show notes. So Omid, thank you again for joining us. This is a kind of controversial topic a little bit. I think that when people talk about or think about Kashk, there can be kind of polarizing opinions. Some people can't eat certain foods without it. Some people won't eat that food if it has kashk in it. Like, for example, like origination. Like I have a friend who won't eat any origination if it doesn't have kashk. And, me as a intro to kashk type of person, I typically wouldn't have the osh that had kashk in it. So hopefully you can share your knowledge about kashk with us.
Wonderful. I love how you started this conversation. It really can be rather controversial. You would think, I thought as an Iranian, that every Iranian must love kashk. And until I came across a couple of friends that were like, oh no, I'm not a kashk person, which really bewildered and surprised me. I think it is important to recognize, what kashk is and why is it so controversial. If I was just to give a quick little elevator speech around kashk, is that it is hearty, it is strong, it is potent, and it has a wide range of flavors that I think if I was to name the core flavors, it would be salty, it'll be tangy, and it has that richness of fermentation flavor profile, which I would venture out and call that umami. So there's a lot of stuff packed into this humble little milk product we call kashk. So it doesn't surprise me that now that I know more about, when we break it down, now it doesn't surprise me that some people actually maybe don't quite gravitate toward it or appreciate it the way perhaps that I do.
It's hard to describe the flavor. I think you did a really excellent job, but would you say that it has almost like goat essence? Or I've grown to like it. I didn't used to love it, and now I do like it better. And I don't know if it's one of those things like for me as an adult, my palate, sometimes I need to taste it several times before I can appreciate it, but I do like it now.
I think the key word is the fermentation. Not everybody appreciates fermentation flavors as much as the rest of people, right? So when you think about other fermented products like kimchi, for example, right? While I may love it, other people might say, oh, it has a very strong flavor or aroma to it. I think kashk is much the same way, that because of its strong flavor, it can be a little bit, less than popular and less than favored.
Yeah. So kashk is not a food that we eat on its own, right?
Correct.
It's an addition to different types of foods. So it's not like you're going to go have like a bowl of kashk on its own. You're going to add that to other foods, and it comes in different forms.
Maybe if you really loved it.
I'm just loving the idea of a bowl of a kashk.
So what is it? You mentioned a milk product.
Yeah.
I think we've been criticized before about calling it like a yogurt byproduct. So spend a few minutes just to tell us like what it is and how it's made.
I just appreciate breaking this down, really, because I think there are so many different terms and references that we use that are not always accurate, much like whey or buttermilk product. Like, I think there are just a lot of confusing references. So let's break it down. To me, Kashk is the quintessential and art of preservation. It started a long ago when shepherds needed to preserve the milk that was available to them. And there was a time where, this is obviously before refrigeration. So this milk, typically sheep milk, was harvested and cultured to turn into yogurt, which is a great way of preserving the milk. Then this yogurt got churned into making butter. So essentially, you made yogurt butter, which when you do that, you obviously extract all the fat from that milk, from that yogurt. What's left behind is this mass, this essentially creamy liquid without any fat that then was either left out in sacks to drip dry or salted and cooked a bit more to separate the curds. Those curds were then, think of it much like putting it into a cheesecloth or a nut milk bag, were held in for a length of period of time that drip dried, and then you would squeeze as much of the liquid out, and that would be the curd that we would call kashk. These curds were then formed into round or oval shapes and left out to dry. And when you do that, obviously that's where the fermentation takes place, which gives it that richness, that unique scent, unique flavor that comes from the fermentation process. And once it was dried, then it's now shelf stable and it could last forever and a day. So that is how traditionally old school kashk was made. Today, I think we can bypass all of that and make it yourself at home, which I actually love making it at home. The flavor that you get is really tasty and yummy. You get to adjust it to your preference. So what I typically do is get a creamy, full fat, kind of a sour tasting yogurt. I love European style yogurt for that reason. And so you mix your yogurt with some water. And this is where patience is a virtue, as I always say, such a virtue in Iranian cuisine, to just learn to be patient and learn to dedicate the time that the food actually needs to honor the process. So you cook the yogurt and water down till it turns into practically a paste. You take this paste, you once again put it into a cheesecloth, and you wring out all the liquid. You can use the liquid for other purposes, but for the sake of kashk making, that pulp is then rehydrated with a little bit of water and a touch of salt. You get to adjust how much salt you want to add in there, but some is needed. And you put it into your blender, high-speed food processor, and you reconstitute it. And now you have this creamy, tangy, and salty, and let's say umami one more time, umami concoction that we call kashk. And that is freshly made kashk that you could keep in your refrigerator for about a week or so, or you can put it in the freezer for long-term storage. So that's how you make homemade kashk.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, sounds delicious.
So I'm sure that the flavor of that is just so much more superior than what you can get like out of jar or something.
Absolutely. And one of the things I particularly like about homemade kashk is that the consistency of the flavor. When I go to the store to buy kashk, one day I buy brand A, the next day I buy brand B, and they are the consistency, the flavor, the amount of fat, the amount of salt varies. So I can never be sure how my dish is going to turn out when I buy different jars, unless if I find a brand that I like and I can stick to it. But I do like making things from scratch.
Yeah.
And so to me, not only it gives me an opportunity to honor the tradition, but also create consistency in a dish. And it isn't hard to make, it's just time consuming. from start to beginning, I think it will take you about 3 hours to make the kashk. So make a big giant vat of it, and so then you get to keep it in the freezer for as long as you need it.
If you want to be really crafty, you could make the yogurt yourself and make the
Totally.
kashk out of the yogurt.
Wow.
Totally, right. And so then add another couple of days to that process.
Yeah.
Your version is a bit modern, so if you wanted to make like a very more traditional tasting one, would you use a goat milk or sheep?
Totally, you could. Goat or sheep milk, you can absolutely use that. I think just cooking it down and turning it into a pulp, it just builds so much more flavor in there to begin with. But I'm absolutely loving the idea of starting with sheep milk or goat milk and noticing the differences. And maybe something is a little bit more palatable for someone compared to the other. So trying it out to see which one really speaks your palate language.
Yeah, and you have the ability to do that when you're making it from scratch yourself.
Absolutely. Yes.
So what are some of your favorite ways to enjoy it?
Obviously, as an Iranian, right? So your go-to utilization of kashk is, particularly around this time of the year for Nowruz, is ash reshte, which is our classic noodles, beans, and herbs, which layers in kashk inside this ash, as well as a kind of a dressing, a topping on top of it. So that's a given. The other that is automatically given is our beloved kashk bademjun, which is you cook the eggplant, lots of good piyaz dagh, fried onions, and seer dagh and nana dagh. These are all fried mint sauce and caramelized onions and all that good stuff that you put on top and then layer in not only inside, but also again as a topping on top of the bademjun, the eggplant. My favorite new ways to actually use kashk is to use the same recipe, so to speak, except I swap eggplant with butternut squash. So you roast butternut squash and you mash it and you use the exact same ritual, a tradition around adding caramelized onions and fried mint on top of it. So now not only you have the saltiness, the tanginess, the umami, but you also added a layer of the sweetness.
Yes.
So it's just a fireworks of flavor that could come through.
Wow. That sounds amazing.
So those are my favorite ones. I just finished teaching some Nowruz classes, and I have such a diverse group of students that attend these classes. And as I'm introducing kashk to them and telling them, how Iranians use them, I presented it to them like, can you imagine where you would use kashk? And I loved the idea because you and I might think of it through a very specific Iranian lens, like, oh, this is what you do with kashk, or you would never do this with kashk. But when you take those boundaries off, and to someone who's never experienced kashk before, and they're visualizing and imagining what they can do with it, I love the diversity and the imagination. So somebody was like, oh, I wonder if I could use it in my mashed potato. I'm like, I never would have thought to do that. And I don't know if it would taste good or not, because clearly I haven't tried it. But I thought, oh, why wouldn't I? Right? Why wouldn't I?
Yeah, you think about what you would drizzle another kind of topping or yogurt sauce or like on your roasted carrots or something.
Yeah, roasted vegetables. Yeah.
Totally. Right. I mean, to go beyond the osh category, next time you make a creamy soup, any kind of soup, cream of carrot soup, cream of butternut squash soup, cream of celery soup, right? Why couldn't you imagine incorporating some kashk in there to just lift it up? Like you don't want it to be a kashk soup, but you add a little bit in there as a flavor enhancer that could just go beyond okay, this is what kashk is used for, and be very creative with it.
Or
Yeah.
a mushroom soup or something.
Oh, yes.
Maybe like roasted Brussels sprouts.
Ooh.
And then maybe kind of drizzle that with some toasted pepitas or maybe even a little bit of zyrtishk.
What time is dinner coming over?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, that sounds really good.
Hey, friends, just wanted to take a second to say thank you to this week's episode sponsor, Oina Natural Foods. This is a family-owned business here in the San Francisco Bay Area. They make the best cuckoo or Persian frittatas, dips, and sauces. They're 100% natural, Oina kuku is packed with vegetables bound with eggs and baked, never fried. Free of dairy, gluten, and soy. It's ready to eat. Super convenient. Get yours here in the San Francisco Bay Area delivered. Check GoodEggs or check out their website to see a store near you at oinaturalfoods.com. That's OYNA naturalfoods.com.
So I have to say that I'm kind of like a novice when it comes to Kashk. Again, like I mentioned, like I would typically not have like aşırışte or have Kashk in my foods, but I'm starting to learn a little bit more about it and opening up my horizons to, enjoy this really special ingredient. If I'm not going to make it, I think there's different forms, right? Like I've seen it in a jar, but then I've also seen like hard little rocks of it. Like, so can you tell us about the forms and how someone like me can actually use it?
Sure. Yeah. So yes, most readily available is going to the refrigerator section of your Iranian market and getting a fresh jar of kashk. Or you can go to the herbs and spice section and actually buy the dry powder or little pearls or balls of kashk. My preference is always for the liquid form, just because I haven't fully been able to reconstitute the dried form to be as smooth and creamy as the jars are. But it's a bit of a tomato. The powdered stuff or the solid oval or round balls of kashk are, much more shelf stable and you can hold on to them for much longer. And the answer is absolutely yes. Pour some water into it, put it into a food processor or better, a blender, and reconstitute it. And you would use it much the same way as you would use the fresh ones that you would buy out of a jar.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Okay. And then, so then it's always refrigerated. So
the jars, the liquid prepared jars will always, because it is a dairy product.
Okay, cool. Thank you for giving the recipe a few minutes ago about how to actually make it at home. Would it be possible for anyone who would be interested to try like a vegan yogurt to make the kashk, for like a vegan kashk?
Loving this idea of it. I have not ventured out and tried it, so I'm trying to think.
Well, there are brands, like of almond
Absolutely, yeah.
milk yogurt.
There's cashews,
Yeah.
there's almond, there's coconut, there's
Right.
many versions of it. I can't speak of personal experience, but I am always, now you're giving me an idea. So maybe tonight I will go buy a soy yogurt and give it a try to see if I can make a vegan version of a kashk. I love the idea of it.
We'll look for your video share on that for the result.
Inspired by Bita and Beata.
Yay!
Yes. On the topic of variations, there's a cousin in our family that when she makes aşırışte and shares it, and I love it when she does that, she will use kashk to decorate and enhance it. Her version of kashk has saffron
Yes.
in it, and it's kind of orange and it's really flavorful that way to me. Is that just something that she does? Have you seen that before?
No, it is common. As you know, not only so much love and care goes into preparation of our dishes, but also how we present them is its own art form. As I was preparing aşırışte for class, we don't have a whole lot of time to sit there and design the dishes. So I would tell them, know that a skillful Persian cook will spend an equal amount of time in how they present these dishes, where they put the mint sauce, where do they put the caramelized onion, as well as aşırışte is typically brownish, greenish color. So when you add saffron to your kashk, now all of a sudden it adds a beautiful pop of color, which is quite eye-catching and beautiful to present. So adding saffron not only adds that beautiful color, obviously it adds yet another tantalizing flavor to the already pretty tasty aşırışte to begin with.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Those toppings on the skillful decoration of the aşırışte, it really
level.
stands out. Yeah. It looks really beautiful. And you're like, I don't even know where to pour it from. I don't want to ruin the design. Wow. This has been like really awesome. I definitely need to experiment more with Kashk, and I'm looking forward to trying new ways. I'm kind of interested in the Brussels sprouts and also the butternut squash that you mentioned, Omid. That sounds really delicious. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing how to make Kashk and teaching us about Kashk. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you for people who don't know you? Where can they find you and learn more about your classes?
Thank you. So, quick story. My parents are from the Caspian Sea region of Iran. So when I wanted to have a social media identity, I thought I'll pay homage to where my parents are from. So then I became the Caspian Chef. So I have a blog with the Kashk recipe on my blog at thecaspianchef.com. And you can find me on Instagram under the Caspian Chef as well. So these are the places where I'm most seen.
Great. And we'll link your recipe for Kashk in case anyone wants to try it. I know I'm definitely inspired.
Beautiful.
And I do have to say that your site is really robust with a lot of recipes. I have people all the time sharing recipes with me. They're like, oh, this is from the Caspian Chef. This is Caspian Chef's recipe. So you're a great resource for people who are looking for Persian recipes, and you really make it really simple. And thank you for all of that.
Wonderful. Thank you. I started the blog just so that it was a way to introduce the cuisine to non-Iranians and Iranians who live in diaspora and maybe haven't quite fully learned some of the traditions and the techniques around the cuisine. So my mindset was always not to complicate things. I don't live in Iran, nor do I have access to all the ingredients that we have in Iran. So I put a special focus on making the recipes more accessible and available to an audience that lives outside of Iran, much like us, that could venture out to the grocery store, buy a creamy style European yogurt and add some water and salt, and instantaneously, 3 hours later, have Kashk.
So good.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Omid. Always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you, and bravo for the amazing job you two lovely humans do to present and promote Persian food.
Our pleasure.
Thank you so much. Okay, until next time.
Bye.
Khodafez.
Bye-bye. Khodafez. You've been listening to the Modern Persian Food Podcast with Bita and Beata. Thanks for spending time with us. If you've enjoyed what you heard today, consider telling a friend or giving us a good rating. You can subscribe to our show for free on your favorite podcasting app or find us online at modernpersianfood.com or on Instagram for the recipes and information we talked about today. We'd love to hear your thoughts and see you next time.